Sandman is not the world we are building today. We are building Sandland. Hello, everyone. My name is Isaac, and I am joined by Casey. Say hello,
Hello.
Casey.
Hello. Already am.
And we are doing the World Explorers episode theme over. I am terrible at openings. We are world building today.
Uh-huh. Like we always
And
do.
yes, like we always do. And I'm scrolling through my world building ideas.
Because he has a
And
list now.
yes, I have a list. If I come up with a good idea, I'll write it down so I don't forget. And on here, I don't remember writing this, but it just says a world of sand people made of sand. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's like a world of a bunch of sandmans. Do not remember writing this at all, but it is my favorite on the list, so we're doing it.
Okay, so we're building a world of Sandmans? Like the
Pretty
Spider-Man
much. Kind of
villain?
like, yes, kind of like how we world built a world of ice and ice people, but this time it's sand.
Okay. We just go through all the elements. Or I guess the lesser known elements such as ice and sand. So sand people. Do we want to take our inspiration from Sandman from
I
Spider-Man?
mean, that's immediately where my mind went. A world of sand and sand people made of sand.
So a lot of
Uh,
shape shifting.
I guess so.
But also
So
like
what?
don't hold their shape well.
Yeah. So what does the world look like? I imagine a lot of it is sand, but what else
Yeah.
is there? Like
I
in
mean,
terms of like, the
so
environment.
sand is a result of rock. So it's a very rocky world. It's gotta be to make the sand. What? How else is
Yeah.
sand made? I don't know how sand
I
is.
imagine pillars of rock, like just gigantic towers of rock.
Okay, this is
Uh,
sounding an
I don't
awful
know
lot
how.
like the ice world.
Well, when I think of rocks and desert, for some reason I go into those like settings where there's like I'm gonna say tower-like rocks that are lumpy all the way up,
Okay.
and then maybe
I was
some
thinking it
giant
could be.
random cliffs.
I mean, it could be cool to have mountains in the middle of the desert, like sand mountains. So they're mountains covered in sand, like a thin
Oh,
layer. So they're not sand dunes; they are solid rock you stand on, but they're covered in sand, so it's still kind of slippery.
okay. What about a sand whirlpool?
Those could be fun. A sand ocean?
I
Can
mean,
we
I
have a sand
imagine that's what
ocean?
the entire world is like. I was thinking like maybe there's just this one area where you walk over to it and the sand is like swirling around to this deep black pit, and if you start to wander in there, you get pulled down.
That would be
Um,
how a whirlpool works.
yeah, but this one is made of sand.
So it
Uh,
cuts you as you're going down.
oh yeah, it would do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. It would also get in all the worst places and taste bad and suffocate you probably because when sand moves around, it creates dust. So honestly, I don't know what would kill you first: the scrapes and cuts, the suffocation, or then the actual being pulled down. You'd probably be dead before you hit the bottom.
I mean, I imagine this thing is like maybe the force of it like gets your leg stuck in one area, but then in another area it's pushing on you, so it might like snap your back or something. This
It's
thing is
just ripping you
vicious.
apart. If they
Like
do
this is
find your
worse.
body, you can't tell that it's you because you're just so mangled.
This is worse than a regular whirlpool.
Well,
I
yeah,
thought
because
this would
it's
be
sand.
safer than a regular. No,
No,
this
sand
is.
is awful. I hate sand. I don't go to beaches because I dislike sand.
Wow, this is vicious.
Yes.
Okay,
Avoid the sand whirlpool.
so where do the sand whirlpools lead?
Death.
Just Death Valley.
Well, I assume it's kind of like so you know how whirlpools just lead into water and deep water and then you drown. I assume that the sand pit probably ends with a, I guess, eye of the storm, which is just like a solid rock at the bottom, which you slam against. So if you somehow survive it, all the other, you then get pummeled into a rock at 80 miles per hour, so you're dead then. But if you
Ooh,
happen to somehow survive that, you're then just stuck in like a rock pit thing with sand swirling around you, kicking out a bunch of dirt and suffocating you.
I just thought of something.
What?
What if there are areas, if not the whole world, but at least areas underneath the first layer of the Earth, or this Earth? What are we calling this place? Sandtopia?
No.
Uh, Sandland.
Also no. How about Sambana? So like a
Sandbana?
savannah, but sandbana.
Sandbana, ooh la la.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll call it Sandbana.
Okay.
Um,
Feel free to come up with
so
something better in the comments.
Sandland.
No.
uh,
Don't be
anyway,
basic.
so there would be like this thin crust of Sandbana at the top, and then if you go into the whirlpool of sand, it pulls you down underneath that crust where there's this big open space, but the I don't want to say earth, but the land above your head is supported by stone pillars that, when they go up into the earth, sometimes the crust of Sambana, they will penetrate and keep on going up further and further, and that's how you get like those towers of rock. That's what they are.
Okay, yeah.
And so, if on one hand we could have just the occasional tower that's supporting this crust. On the other hand, we could make it so that there's just areas underneath the whirlpool that are big, empty, open gaps, and those pillars are like warning signs to people that the whirlpool is nearby. Don't go over there.
So are we suggesting then that the whirlpools are they're kind of like the geysers at Yellowstone where they stay for a while but then they can go dormant and then move somewhere else? And you never that's the danger of Yellowstone. You never know when a new geyser is going to show up and it could be under your feet.
I was thinking that they just stay stationary and permanently work, but I like your idea better.
Yeah, so eventually they could fade away and they leave behind stone pillars or I guess they destroy stone pillars, like the stone pillars come first and then the whirlpool after and then so normally in books and
I was thinking maybe the way this could work is that the whirlpools might be forming the pillars somehow.
so like they swirl around and then they start actually gathering rock in the center and pushing it together.
Maybe they're compacting the sand so tightly that it forms rock.
Ooh.
And then as it's doing that, maybe it's also like pulling rock from under the ground. This is where you get these big gaps beneath the crust. And as it's forming these gaps, it'll start pushing the rocks into these pillar formations that eventually it starts pushing up out of the ground. It'd be hard to like make this work in real life.
This isn't real life. It's fine.
Like it's fantasy, so
yeah, but I feel like there's a scientific way. I feel like you could flubber it enough to make people believe what you're saying is real.
Scientific.
Yeah, I think you could make people believe that this. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, of course. Whirlpools of sand would make pillars from the center, and then I guess once the pillar hits a high enough point, it kind of stops the whirlpool from being able to swirl, and it stops working. And it just fades away.
That could work. But then where does the whirlpool go? Or how do new ones form?
Yeah, that's the real question is how does a whirlpool start or why does a whirlpool start?
We're spending a lot of time on these whirlpools.
Well, something tells me this is the main purpose of this world. Like, this is the defining
Probably.
feature of them is the whirlpools. This is the big danger is that these things could just appear at any time and just wipe out your civilization.
Okay, so how would they form? How do you start a sand whirlpool that creates a hole under the ground, like the air bubble under the ground?
So how about we dive back under the crust for a bit and decide what's under there that might cause a lot of wind.
It might cause wind underneath the crust?
Yeah, because
well, it's mostly solid, isn't it?
Yeah, but like somehow... What if
it's coming from the core?
What if we throw in a magic element with these rocks, and that the crust of like the rock area of the rocks of this world produce wind?
Rocks produce wind.
Yeah.
Okay.
So occasionally the rocks get like since so the rocks are all condensed together underneath the crust. They can't go anywhere, so they can't be producing wind. So they get this buildup in within themselves of just this desire to use their rocks. We have weird rocks in our
Oh, so
world.
they are constantly trying to push wind, and then once it gets reaches a tipping point where it builds up so much that it just breaks through and
Yeah,
starts
and
the
then the
whirlpool.
whirlpool
I
starts,
like this.
and then and then these towers are rocks that have lost their wind power. So
Yeah,
once they
they're
lose
like
their wind
losing their
power, they
wind
get
power.
flown in and they make these towers, and they no longer. Or maybe they have like, and then they start building it up, which means so they now have to start rebuilding their wind power. But now that they're above the surface, they can just create like a light wind. That means these towers are always producing breezes.
Ooh. So energy plantations would be nearby.
Yeah, they can farm. Yeah, this society would be wind powered.
Yeah.
Which is interesting considering usually desert societies are sun powered, but here it would be wind. So we'll break
Yeah.
from the
I mean,
norm
this
there.
would be like their main source of energy. Like for like the real world, wind and solar aren't the main source of energy because they're not very efficient. But
They're getting
here,
better though.
with constant wind and no need to worry about them like freezing over in snow or
Yeah,
anything,
because it's magic rock.
that would be like constant, reliable source
Also,
of
yeah,
energy.
and if we want this to be a world where exporting to other worlds, that's a huge economy of forever eternal wind rocks, wind producing rocks. Do you know how much those would be worth? A lot.
I mean, unless there was too heavy of a supply,
You mean like too
then
many?
suddenly,
I mean,
like because you're talking about an entire world of magic rocks. I imagine there's plenty of supply.
yeah, true. I don't know, but think about it. This is the only planet, though, in general that has it. And if we put this in a world of solar systems full of thousands and thousands of planets with life on it, all of a sudden, there's never enough. One planet can't supply for thousands of planets.
Yeah, I like this.
Yes, I do too.
Okay, so we've come up with I'd say a pretty good way of how these whirlpools work, how they form, where they come from, how they work, how they disappear, uh, everything.
Yeah.
Now, what? Now you've got stories about somebody uh, who gets maybe somebody gets they're lost, so you go out to find them. Turns out they have found themselves trapped uh, in a whirlpool of sand, and they've miraculously survived at the bottom. Now you've got to find a way to get down there and get them out safely.
Or
Or maybe
just
what happens is once the whirlpool stops spinning, it's like now you're on a time limit because once the whirlpool stops spinning,
the
uh,
sand's gonna start coming
it,
crashing down
yes,
again.
it comes crashing down and fills the inside.
Or even maybe some
Now I
people.
imagine that these things last for a long time. Like I'd say that these things probably go for at least a year.
Yeah, my thought was a year or two. I don't think much longer. I think 3 would be the longest a whirlpool would last. Just
Yeah, maybe it's somewhat unpredictable.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes they just come and they're gone, and they just leave a little baby tower, and then other times they just keep going and going. You have a tower that like reaches to the sky. Uh, but I think another fun story would actually be like a scientific adventure down the whirlpool. Like they civilization has finally reached a point where they feel like they have the technology to safely go into the whirlpool. And this is the first group of adventurers who finally gets to see the under the earth crust. Because I think it might be hard to actually get under the earth crust. For one, sand fills in afterwards, so that after a whirlpool dies, the whirlpool is too dangerous to go down. And wind rocks, you might be mining up these rocks and stuff, but once you actually go under into a tunnel where all the rocks do is blow wind, and there's no place for that wind to go, that seems dangerous to me. Just
That'd be extremely dangerous.
yeah, and very hard
Because
to
every
maneuver.
time you swing your pickaxe, it bursts wind at you.
Yeah, mining these would be interesting. I'm not.
Yeah, like how would you protect yourself if you went to start mining these things?
I almost think it would have to be. They'd have to use the towers. Like they'd rely on the towers to gather their rocks until they hit an industrial era where they can start mining with like robots or with protective gear that you need technology to develop.
And you would need some serious protective equipment. Like, because you gotta have something like every time you swing your pickaxe, a rock is gonna be flying in your face.
Yeah.
Like, that is dangerous. You need like a serious suit of armor, and
Yeah.
whoever's doing this has to get some pretty good pay.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe that's what it is. It's like there's plenty of rocks, but they're hard and difficult to obtain, and so they're expensive.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. That's what makes sense. And then they want to take the towers, but these towers are also the civilizations like the that live on this planet. That's their source of wind. Like they rely purely on the towers that have been formed by the whirlpool. So suddenly you have battles between like the money people who want money and want to destroy these towers and the actual societies living there who rely on them, and
Yeah.
that's a fun conflict.
Fun conflict story. Yeah. Building on that, um, you have the same society is now in economic disaster. They need money now, and but if they get rid of their towers, that is short-term gain, but long-term is going to hurt them. And maybe there's some people who are saying we need to relocate, go find a new whirlpool with towers and stuff to live at. Other people are like, no, at that point we might as well go ahead and mine those towers for that. No, we don't have the resources to keep going back and forth. No, we need to mine. No, that's too dangerous, and we don't have enough time or anything for that.
Yep.
Like, here's some interesting. You could build an entire new economic system and political system and everything off of these whirlpools.
These whirlpools are cool. Do I want to live in this world? No, not really. It doesn't appeal to me, but just because.
No, absolutely not.
I mean,
Like,
these whirlpools appear with zero notice. I mean, I guess
yeah,
shaking.
maybe there's like maybe there's like a shaking and the ground
I,
starts to
yeah,
shake.
I feel like, well, there's
Maybe
no
there's random
grass.
bursts of sand that start flying, like almost like geysers in random directions as the wind is starting to release and stuff starts to sink.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, we got about 10 minutes before this thing forms. Let's get out of here and hit the
Grab your
road.
child, your most valued possessions, and let's skedaddle.
Yeah, I'd say you have about 10 minutes before this thing fully forms,
And these
and you
things,
can't escape.
and these things are huge. Like I think they have like probably a mile radius. Was my
Oh, I
thought, so
was
they can
thinking,
make some good sized towers.
I was thinking that big, but yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not quite a mile. Mile's the biggest. Their
I
biggest one
mean,
would be a
maybe they
mile.
range anywhere from like 1,000 to 6,000 feet or so.
Yeah, around that range. They're big. They're not that little.
It's not like a tiny little whirlpool
No, they will
or
eat
anything like that.
you. It'll eat a town. Like,
Oh, we make baking soda and vinegar volcanoes. They'd make wind rock uh, whirlpools for their science
oh
projects.
my goodness, that's just the cutest little idea.
Yeah,
Just
they just
seeing.
take little rocks and then they make the whirlpool out of them.
Honestly, the rocks they probably have some really fun games with these rocks. Like, imagine marbles with wind rocks.
Ooh.
Like
And
little
what kind of
pebbles and
sports
stuff.
could you make where you can suddenly produce wind? Maybe you'd have like some sort of like a parachute like thing with a weight on it
With
that
these.
you blow around and you try to push that into a goal.
Okay, here's a question. Would these people have found a way to I guess they would. So I guess that one of the early things they would create are actually containers for the rocks where it kind of stores some of the wind and they can release it on will.
Uh,
And so you can carry around a wind rock that's storing the wind inside it. And you've heard the story of the guy who captured like the north wind in a box and you can open it and it blows for you.
I have not heard that story, but I understand the concept.
Yeah, well, it's a mythology story, but it's a very classic one in a bunch of different mythologies, is where you get a box of wind and you can open it on will, and the wind would, usually for sailors, blow you
Like our
home really
bottled,
fast.
but you can bottle anything video.
Yeah, so in this case, they have that. They have that in wind formed. And they could have some really big ones if they get really big chunks of rock, and you can make vehicles out of it. People are sitting on rocks with like these giant containers on them. and then they press like a button or they pull something. I guess depending
Real
on
quick.
where they are in time, they pull something and the wind comes out and they're off across the sand dunes driving their rock cars.
I mean, you can have like the sand uh, sailor things, the boats that are used in Avatar in the desert.
Yeah,
The sandbenders use something similar to that.
yeah.
Um, Real quick. So, are we decided that these people are not made of sand, right? Just
I think I
clarifying
think I
that.
think it's going on that. I think we the whirlpool is the interesting aspect of this, and if we throw in shifting sand people, it would kind of take away from that.
Yeah, suddenly it's like you're morphing with the sand and trying to escape as you climb through, and instead you're not being all cut up and having your bones snapped.
Yeah. Now, I think something interesting would be a animal or a creature that can shapeshift with the sand.
Ooh, so like the puffs, but with sand,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
referencing back to all of our other
Well, we
worlds,
do that
aren't we?
anyways. Yeah. Well, all worlds are inspired by other worlds. But yeah,
Yeah,
something
but I
kind.
don't think you were thinking of the puffs when you said that.
No, I wasn't actually at all. I was thinking more. I don't know. I was thinking more wolves for some reason. Was my first thought.
I was thinking of those brown things. I don't know what they're called from Star Wars that just sort of dig into the sand on Tatooine.
Oh, yeah, I guess maybe. I don't know. I was thinking more like shadow wolves, which are from a show, which they shapeshift into whatever, but they're like normal forms of wolf is their preferred. But so like sand creatures, which could be nice or could not. That's something we need to decide.
The sand. We could have sand wolves
Just in
if we
general.
want them to be wolves.
I mean, I sand wolves. I mean, wolves are pretty cliche for the shapeshifter, just because we have werewolves and stuff like that. And wolves
Okay,
are
so
associated.
sand snakes.
As long as they're not worms, I refuse for worms to be a part of this world.
Worms.
No,
Why'd it have to be
the
worms?
amount of sand worms that are in sand worlds is stupid, and we're not adding to it.
Okay, so sand snakes. Um, are these like cobras or what?
Yeah, I like the idea of them having a poison, and in which case, parts of them are solid, so like their
They
teeth.
inject sand into the bloodstream.
What would that do to you?
I don't know. Would you get a blood clot from that?
You know what? One moment.
Yeah,
Injecting.
just think about what happens
This is a
injecting
Google
sand into
moment.
blood.
What happens when you inject sand into blood?
Crystalline materials in someone's bloodstream.
Yeah, that's what popped up in mine first. It doesn't sound good.
Yeah, apparently other people have asked this question for some reason. Why are other people asking this? Who is thinking of this?
Yeah, if larger say. Okay, what happens if sand gets in your bloodstream? If larger say a normal grain of sand, they will be likely to be adhered to the side of major blood vessels and then walled off and then like taken out. But what if you have a lot? Like, what if this creature is literally here's like a fun idea is that okay, we're throwing shapeshifting out. Instead, these snakes are like little sand vacuums. So they can suck sand up with their tail and then inject it through their teeth.
Oh,
So that
okay.
way they could really ooh wow. They could
I
cause
like that.
stroke, serious brain damage,
Wait, do they
clog
inject
up
with
lamb.
muscle or do they inject with wind power?
I guess it would be kind of wind powered when they're blowing, like they're
Everything is
sucking and
wind seems to
blowing.
be wind powered
Yeah.
in this. Maybe they get the wind from the sand. Like
Okay, so
maybe
it does.
sand has a maybe because the sand is rock, it has a very minor amount of wind magic in it. Not enough to move on its own, but when it goes through the snake, it's maybe somehow compressing it through its body to activate the magic to quickly force it out through its fangs. Uh,
Yeah, because the sand is
to,
magic, is wind rock, just
yeah,
absolutely pulverized, probably because of these these whirlpools are also creating a
Yeah.
lot more sand.
So it has a very minor amount of magic, but it's not enough to move it on its own. But when it goes through the sand snake, it activates that magic and it pushes it into the bloodstream.
Yeah, and
That
by
world is vicious.
yeah, with my very little research done on this, by that I mean I looked at one website, and it was a
I
question
looked at
website.
Reddit.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was Reddit. It seems that if you got bit, depending where you got bit by the snake, is where how bad it would be. Like if you get like bit in the neck, you're done for. But if you get bit in the leg, it could just be excruciating pain as long as you remove it quickly. So it could be anything from like it doesn't bug you to it hurts to you lose a limb to it kills you, depending on where it bites you and how long it's got you in your grasp. Also,
Okay, so
also they blend in with sand, obviously.
yeah, they'll be like sort of a tannish color,
Yeah.
yellowish.
I mean, we can make them kind of rattlesnake-like, so they have a like they make a little vacuum sound, so you can hear like a little sound as they go along. Instead of it's like a sucked-in slither, so instead of going it goes.
I love it.
I don't know what that
So
sounded like to you.
it sounded like weird. It sounded somewhere between slurping through a straw
Yeah.
and blowing your nose.
Yeah, I'm going for a snake drinking out of a straw, I think is the sound we're going for. That's what they sound like. Yeah, so that's how you
So,
know that they're there. You can hear them pretty. They're not the quietest creatures.
so of course, now that we have this snake creature that can make people lose their limbs or die, of course, people in this world are going to try and find a way to sort of combat these effects.
Uh,
So, what would they do? What sort of treatments would they have in place if someone got bit? Is there like different? Is there some kind of plant that they
oh,
can
like a
use?
plant that absorbs sand and maybe
That'd be
eats it?
weird. Maybe something that can like naturally cause your blood to grind down
I mean, I kind
or
of.
sort of maybe
Well,
erode the sand within the bloodstream so that it's not effective.
I mean, here's the thing. In this world, there's not really dirt or anything. So the idea of a plant that lives off of sand, like can condense sand and turn it into energy. Well, think about it. This sand has wind, which is energy, stored magical energy stored into it. So the idea of a plant that can break it down and turn that wind energy to food for itself actually
Oh,
makes a lot of
okay.
sense. And the fact that this, say, they do it through the roots, so you would take the roots of this plant and like drink it or eat it, and it gets into your, or I guess you'd have to inject it into your bloodstream. You inject it into your bloodstream, and it helps condense all the sand and like neutralize it and stuff and save your life from the snake. And
Well,
also just the fact that these people probably inhale a lot of sand normally, so eating these plants to help you digest sand could be useful. I don't know.
yeah, maybe. If we are talking about like if we do have other planets out there that they trade with and stuff, um, maybe these people have a natural immunity. Maybe not the best, but a somewhat natural immunity to these sand snakes because of where they live, and they're always inhaling sand and everything.
Yeah,
But newer people who come down from a different planet, if they get bit by one of these things,
it hurts worse.
they need immediate medical attention or they're done for.
Pretty much. Yeah. And I get, yeah, there's a lot of variations to how much damage the sand snake does depending on its mood.
And just, how much sand it manages to squeeze into you.
Yeah. So, speaking of
Interestingly
plants,
enough, hold
yeah,
on real quick.
yeah.
Interestingly enough, a baby snake in real life is more deadly than an adult snake because they can't stop themselves from injecting venom. Is this a similar situation with these snakes? Would a baby snake uh, not be able to stop itself from injecting sand, or do even the adult snakes just inject as much sand as possible?
I think this is, they just inject as much sand as possible. This is just what they do.
Okay.
Baby vacuums and scary. Yeah. That's what
Oh,
I
but
think.
imagine the baby ones. You can barely see these things. You can already barely see the adults. Imagine the babies just jump out of nowhere and bite your ankle.
Yep. I think they have thick hides clothing, and in order to get something like that, we need an animal with a thick hide. That's
Okay,
immune. It's we need an animal that itself its armor is so strong the snake can't eat it. Like it can't attack it. I guess I don't know what these sand snakes eat.
and it would have very wide, flat feet so that it can walk on the sand easily.
Yes. It has to be big enough that these people can make clothes out of it relatively easily.
I imagine it being short and long, uh, big and bulky, kind of like a bison, maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
my first thought was a cattle of some sort.
yeah, something like that. Do we milk them like we milk the Kirin?
I mean, they need to get liquids. Speaking of, how do they get liquids like water and stuff? This isn't really a planet where it rains.
Yeah. Maybe there are oases, and maybe there are some areas like where it's mostly rock instead of sand, and there will be pools of water there, or maybe a waterfall somewhere.
I don't know,
Uh,
because
maybe there
wind
even
and
go
water
even
don't
maybe
really
you go even
mix.
further. Maybe if you go even further underneath the earth, there are natural streams flowing around, and then you can have like geysers and stuff that shoot up to the
Oh yeah,
surface like a
geysers would make
volcano,
sense.
and then it'll create like waterfalls or oases or whatever,
I mean, I guess that's where the people would live mostly, especially considering I
at
think
least
those.
nearby.
Yeah, because those places would probably be safe from the whirlpool because their rocks are have a way to get their energy out via the
Yeah, it
geysers
goes
and
through the
stuff.
geyser.
So it's
I assume that the area around it wouldn't be super safe, but like right at that area, you're probably safe.
yeah. So it's I bet people got
I bet there are
oases
some
are a good place to
natural
live.
tunnels that have formed underneath the ground,
True.
um, so that you don't have to worry about like explosions of rocks. Because otherwise, if you're not forming a whirlpool, rocks would just be exploding out of nowhere. So I think
Yeah.
that maybe there are like natural tunnels that have formed underneath this area. So if you're building a foundation for a building, you just got to be careful where you're putting it.
I mean, also there just it'd be very windy in that area too, like extra windy, like even more so than usual.
Yeah,
Just
the
because
wind
you
would be
have
like coming
these,
up from the ground,
yeah, you
like
have a
straight up wind. It's not even like horizontal wind now. You're talking about vertical wind just coming from the ground.
I mean, eventually it disperses, but yes.
Kite flying would work like 24/7.
I can imagine, honestly, maybe, you know how we have like javelin throws where you try to throw like those things as far as you can? I'd imagine here they
Yeah,
do that with themselves. So they get like little gliders and they hop into these streams because it's not like it's hot or anything. It's just normal temperature, and then they get shot up, and then it's to see who can glide the furthest off of it.
yeah. This is like a form of this is both a game and fun and sport and transportation all in one.
Oh yeah, it's a good
Like
transportation too.
you can't you tell me that people aren't gonna stick a parachute or hang glider or something along those lines in the way of the wind and just start going up. Like that is an obvious thing. I think that they would immediately pick up and be like, "Let's fly!"
Yeah, they would
But
capture the ability to fly way faster than we did.
yeah. Now the thing about it is, they could only really go from if they were leaving the rocky area, they'd be going to an area without as much wind.
Yeah.
So then that means that
I mean, here's the thing. I think they could create like wind highways using the stones. If they get bigger ones and towers and stuff, and then they have these shields that they can put around the stones to direct the airflow to one area. All of a sudden, you have like wind highways which you can fly along.
yeah, I could see that working. Like they would probably build that sort of transportation system. I imagine there would also be areas where what would they do for like water transportation rather than having one pool, a central area of water? Would they like be digging trenches to go around the
Well,
world?
digging's
Or not
dangerous.
the world. What? Oh
Digging is
yeah, it is.
dangerous.
Maybe if you only dig to a point, like dig through the sand, and so all that's there is the stone. Maybe.
Oh.
Um, maybe they would have like pipes. I don't know, but where would you get the metal? Uh,
I
maybe
don't
this
know.
world doesn't have metal.
Maybe that's one of the big issues is water transportation. It's just not something they know how to do.
If they have access, if other planets are willing to trade with them, maybe they'll trade them some metal and some pipes. I don't know.
Yeah, but early on, I think a lot of them are really just condensed to these oases because of their need of water.
Right. So we've come up with a bunch of fun, creative ways of using this wind. Now, there is one way. Once you introduce a new element like this, there's one way that somebody out there is surely going to use it for. How would this wind be used as a weapon?
Well, think about how good those little stones are going to be as bullets.
Yeah, I mean, you could basically build a gun where rather than it triggering like gunpowder or anything, you break the stone in the barrel and it goes flying.
And it kills. Like it's a full blown bullet.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine because the stone is smaller, it probably wouldn't have that much magical wind or anything built up. However,
It could be
if
enough.
you had like maybe a casing that it was in, and then you broke the casing so it could shoot out, that could work.
Or even if you
Um,
have like a bigger stone that then fires out the smaller one.
yeah, but you're looking at a bigger gun at that point. Like
I mean,
you're looking at
imagine a
more cannon
cannon.
size. Yeah, you could, people would definitely make cannons out of this.
Yeah, it's scary.
Um, what other things could people do? What if somebody managed to figure out how to induce whirlpools?
That'd
Like
be
you
horrifying.
dig a deep enough hole, and maybe like if you drop several rocks down in there, and they hit solid rock beneath them, they break, and maybe they start breaking the the rocks underneath it, and suddenly that induces a whirlpool to start.
I
Now,
mean that
usually these
us
whirlpools would be smaller than your average, I imagine, because they haven't naturally built up long enough,
honestly
and you're
though, like if
artificially.
anything, this is a good like something that could be used to farm the stone. Like this could be a valid method of farming stone is to induce these smaller whirlpools, get up mini towers and get to use those harvest those
Oh,
stones.
oh, you would. This is where like maybe some gliding can come in handy. You fly above head, drop the rocks, and watch them smash.
The only real danger now is the drilling of the hole, which is very dangerous.
Well, I don't imagine it would be too dangerous when you're going through the sand because the sand lacks much magic, and maybe you'd be getting some bursts of sand at first from the wind that's been sitting underneath it, or the rocks that have been sitting underneath it. But I think after that initial burst, you're good.
Yeah. I don't know, it's just it
Maybe there'll be
releases
the
a lot of it.
occasional one that's been building up like crazy and it is dangerous. So I'd say you find dig just about anywhere and then drop a rock on it and watch it start.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a cool way to mine, and also to release tension nearby, especially if you do it near your home. It's a good way to release
Yeah.
tension around your home so that way it's safer, is to have a lot of mini whirlpools. It's also a good defense, like, just in
Oh
general.
yeah,
Maybe
just
if you
like
have warring
keep it
tribes and
nice
stuff,
out.
having those
Yeah.
whirlpools seem more efficient than a wall.
Think about it, we never really finished building that animal, did we? With the thick hide and the
Oh
armor and the
no, we
snake.
got distracted.
Maybe its entire let's go back to that real quick.
Yeah,
Maybe its entire hoof or whatever is like it's a tall hoof basically, or
like
at least
boots.
the outer shell is. So it goes up its leg
So it
further
looks
than
like it's wearing boots.
kind of, yeah, and it's basically a hoof, so a snake can't bite through it,
Oh,
and
and
it's
that's
safe
what
to
they
walk
would
up.
have to harvest for their own armor.
Yeah, and they would probably be using these if they're not flying. They're probably using these guys as transportation
Yeah.
across the sand because uh, if they're walking, they're at risk of being bitten.
Yeah, but these guys, they can't be bitten, really, so.
Yeah, so you would ride on top of these guys' backs. Um, what do they look like? I for some reason imagine them having a trunk. Like they're
I
these short
did.
guys.
Okay,
Oh,
how about. I was
they're
thinking more
like
like they looked like a yak, so they were really woolly, too. I don't know why I
yeah,
was
they could
thinking,
be
well,
woolly with a trunk. It's a woolly mammoth. That's what we're world building, right? We're making a mammoth with hooves.
Now, here's the thing though, like their fur, I think is very heat resistant though.
Okay, so rather than it being warm, it just keeps the heat out.
Yeah, it's which there is fur that does that. Like that's a legitimate thing we have in our own world. So
Yeah, it more reflects
yeah, it
heat
reflects
from the
sunlight.
sun's rays.
Yeah, it's like apparently if you paint your roof the blackest color black, you like your house gets infinitely cooler, like noticeably colder.
Huh.
So these creatures would be extremely black, which
Okay, because
means
I
that
thought
these
that
people's
black absorbed heat
well it
and
can,
energy.
or is it white? I don't know.
I'm pretty sure white is reflective. That's
Okay.
why if you look at if you look outside when it's snowing, sometimes it's hard to see because the sun is reflecting off of all the snow. Um, but black absorbs heat energy. Maybe the reason that your house gets cooler when you paint the ceiling, or not the ceiling, that the roof black, is because it's absorbing everything.
Yeah, it is. It's ultra white.
Uh,
Yeah, you're right. So
yeah,
these creatures would
rather
actually be
than white, which
extremely
would
white.
reflect it. But yeah.
Also, which would make actually touching them really hot.
Oh yeah, these guys would be really hot. You would need a You would absolutely need a saddle.
But I also think that's a very interesting defense mechanism and challenge the natives have in riding them is that you can't like if you have to be really careful
You burn
riding
yourself
them.
if you touch them.
Yeah, because you burn yourself if you touch them. Also, though, their own armor, that means these people probably wear these white, like the white wool and stuff too, on really hot days. So,
Maybe it's like on one hand you're protecting yourself, on the other
you're
you
injuring
got to be
everyone else.
careful because you might burn yourself.
I mean, it might be fun, like, to
If
make...
you had another layer underneath it and had a way of getting it off without burning
True.
yourself, like when it slips over your head, if it's like a shirt, um, that might be a challenge.
I mean, making your roofs out of it could be useful. Especially
Oh yeah,
considering they don't get
people would
rain.
make it out of the roof. Like you
They don't
stick,
get rain, so...
yeah, you put one of these creatures in the shade for a while, let it cool off, take its wool, and then make a roof out of it.
Yeah,
Suddenly,
you just have to shear it in the shade. And then you have to
yeah.
put it up on the roof really fast before it starts heating up. Like it's a process, and I'm
You
sure
could
people
turn this
get burned.
You can
But
turn this into like a cooking method where it gets hot and you can now cook food on it.
that
Or
is so. I just got the image of these guys like walking through the desert, and they're just cooking like an egg on this yak thing, as they're walking around.
I imagine they would have like a flat stone or something.
Well, yeah, they're
Uh,
cooking on the go though. They got their skillet, and it's heating. I don't know why that amused me so much, but I love that picture.
It's like the egg is just like seeping through their wool, and
Okay.
and
I know not many people are watching this, but if you are and you're an artist, can you just draw me the scene of these sand deserts? There's a whirlpool in the background. There's some towers up and about with with a person flying between towers on their glider, and there's just this lone person sitting on his woolly mammoth, cooking something on a rock stone thing with these little snakes trying to bite at this woolly mammoth but not being able to. I want that picture. Please and thank you.
that is one of the greatest images
Yeah,
we've
that,
ever
my
gotten
friend,
from the world.
is a book cover.
That is like,
That's a book cover.
imagine you're just going through the bookstore, you're just browsing, and you see that, and you're just like, what the
But it
heck
looks
is
majestic and
that?
cool. Like it
Yes, but
seems
it's
majestic.
kind of silly how he's frying an egg on this thing.
Yeah, but there's that person flying, and those snakes are doing something weird, and you got a whirlpool. Like you're intrigued.
Yeah,
Also,
I mean, it's a lot to fit on a cover.
I mean, I think it would work though, because it seems like it might be a lot, but it's really not. Because think about it, it's all sands. You got your blue sky, and then you just have the whirlpool, this person on the creature with the snakes, and then these two towers with someone like flying between them. It's honestly not that much, and it's spaced out in a way that would be like very, I don't know, it almost seemed peaceful. If, 3 out of the 5 things on the cover weren't trying to kill you.
Yeah, it's like, it's a world where because of the wind, it's extremely useful. Imagine if maybe like there was some point where somewhere where there are snakes nearby, and then there's a sudden burst from the ground of wind, and now there's snakes flying through the air.
That's amazing. I mean, maybe
I
they
don't think they'd be very threatening at that point. Maybe they'd be angry after they settle, and they'd be
I
threatening.
mean,
But flying through
think
the air,
about
no,
it.
it's
That's
just
the number one way to stop these snakes is to take them off the sand. Like if they don't have sand, all you got is like I mean, it feels like you got a shot. It hurts a
yes, you
little,
live on the
but
rock area.
yeah, because they're only dangerous if they're on the sand. I mean, they're a bit painful, but like I said, it's like getting a shot versus uh your blood starting to clot and you dying. But
Yeah,
we're as amazing as this world is, and how we could probably spend another hour on it. We're actually like nearing running out of time.
yeah. I wasn't sure when we started, but this one turned out really well. I,
I'm glad we moved away from sand people and went to these whirlpools. These whirlpools are
yeah, like this
so
is
cool.
way better than I thought it was gonna be.
Magic wind rocks are awesome. I
Yeah,
mean,
I started off with just the random idea of sand people on a sand planet, and it's like, okay, where can we go with this? And it's like this doesn't seem like a place where we could go very far because it's all boring. But like the ice world and the cloud world,
where we
we
went
took
off,
it to places like you wouldn't expect.
and it's so
Wind
good.
rocks.
It's so good. Like I would say that the world didn't need another desert-based story, but I want this desert-based story. I've changed my mind. It can have one more. It can have this one. it's it's just so good. Just the idea, and I liked how this was a world that was really heavily based on like one element. We took one element, we ran with it, and we created the world with it. So, which
Yep,
is
just
the
made it
whirlpools.
out of sand and gave it rock winds. Uh, Stick them together, you get the whirlpool. Suddenly, this is the basis for the entire world.
And you get a really cool world with flying people and animals that burn your skin but are really tameable, and evil snakes and wind powered, and it's just really cool. And I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you get some inspiration from it and want to use it yourselves for like writing prompts and stuff. And also, if you do, feel free like to send it to us so we can read it and like geek over how epic our viewers are in their writing, because
The book
we'll
shall
get
be
feedback if you want. Like if you send it and like leave an email or something, we'll send feedback.
the book shall be titled "Away with the Wind."
Okay, we're ending now. That's it. We're done. On that cheesy note, we're gonna leave. We'll see you guys next week for yet another really cool world based off of a prompt. And yeah, bye guys.
Banana, ooh la la. I'm sinking in whirlpool, Sandana, ooh la la. I'm getting bitten by the snake, so ooh la la. Sandana, Sandana, ooh la la.